Welcome to the Alpha's Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Chapter 20. Come on. Lev, stay still. Alpha Luke won't want to see you if you're all smelly. Lilia laughed. Lev was splashing a lot of water out of the tub in an effort to end his bath. Lilia hadn't even washed all of the soap off of him. She let him know she was done rinsing him, watched him flail his way out of the bathtub. "No, shake outside or Luke is going to kill us," Lilia shouted. Lev froze and growled softly but stomped outside and shook the water out of his fur in front of several pack members. "Humiliating. Thank you," Lilia sang to him. He huffed and Lilia chuckled, knowing he would probably be grumpy for the rest of the day. She led the way to her family's room and knocked on their door. Johanna answered right away with a smile and greeted Lilia with a tight hug. She greeted Lev with a small, respectful nod. "We're going to Lev's daily training, and then the doctor will be ready to see you," Lilia said, peeking in to wave at her mother who was still getting ready. "Could we see Lev's human form?" "We're very curious, but we won't do it without your permission," Johanna directed at Lev. He glanced at Lilia, looking a little confused. Lilia bent down. "I know you feel vulnerable in your human form," she whispered, even though she knew Johanna could hear. "So you can say no if you want." Lev tilted his head at her, then gave Johanna. She smiled and gave him another nod to say thanks. "We're headed there now, so we'll see you both in a few minutes." "Right. There's an elevator just down the hall, and it's the entire 3rd floor. When you're there, just yell," Lilia instructed after she stood back up. She rubbed Lev's fur back and forth to relax him. "We'll be there," Johanna answered. She shut the door and Lilia and Lev took the stairs up to the medical floor. Alpha Luke was already waiting for them. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," he asked Lev. Lev just hopped up onto the table and Lilia turned her back so he could shift comfortably. When she turned back around, Lev was shifted and covered with a hospital gown. Alpha Luke and Lilia were only able to work on Lev's legs for a few seconds before Johanna announced their arrival. Lev looked over just as Lilia disappeared and he fought the urge to shift. She's going to be with her family. There is no need for a fight. Sure enough, Kate was wheeled around the corner by Lilia with Johanna close behind. Lev tried to ignore their looks of surprises, but the uncomfortable rumble in his chest betrayed him. Lilia left her mother's side quickly and was beside him the next second. "It's all right," she comforted, brushing back his hair. She sent a look to her family that moved their eyes towards Alpha Luke. They introduced themselves again and he explained what they were doing. Luke moved to Lev's hands and started massaging the muscles. Kate whispered to Lilia once she had come back over to her mother's chair. Lilia's face flushed red and she put her hands over her cheeks more. She scolded, but Kate just laughed loudly. "Okay, Lev, today we're going to try and work on your vocal cords. Would you feel more comfortable if Lilia touched your throat, or are you all right with me doing it?" Alpha Luke asked. Lev was fine with the Alpha touching him elsewhere, but his neck was a very protective spot for him. Roman used his neck as a punishment and he didn't really want anyone touching it. He used what muscles he could use in his foot to motion towards Lilia. She smiled tentatively and reached for his neck. He closed his eyes in relaxation and his wolf moaned inside of his head. That caused Lev's eyes to flinch open wide, and he tried to avoid the hands touching his neck. Lilia ripped herself away from him and Alpha Luke stepped in front of her family protectively while Lev panicked. Hey, what's wrong? What's wrong?" Her words were rushed and she tried to hold him down by herself, but was knocked down by his twitching. Johanna shot forward to grab Lilia but missed her by an inch. Alpha Luke held Lev's arms down and growled in his face, exuding as much as alpha power he could. This was a last resort for anyone, Alpha Luke hated to use his powers for this, but Lev was becoming uncontrollable. Once Lev was calm and breathing controllably again, Alpha Luke stepped back and went to check on Lilia. She was still on the ground and feeling fine, she assured everyone in the room. Lev turned his head, saw Lilia on the ground, and panicked again. A deep, thick rumble echoed from his throat, turning into a high-pitched whine. Lilia stood up and assured everyone that she was fine once more before going to sit by Lev's head. "It's all right," she whispered. "That was an impressive noise you just made. Right, Alpha Luke? It means your vocal cords are salvageable, Lev. We should be able to work on that tomorrow." Lev grunted again, making the same noise as before and trying to move his body towards Lilia. "You can shift back if you'd like, Lev. Lilia's mother's appointment is in a few minutes," Alpha Luke said. Lev shifted back quickly and nudged his way into Lilia's arms. This was the first time he had initiated contact like this, and Lilia pushed back her surprise to hug him back. He noticed a small bruise on a hand from the fall and began to lick it like crazy. "I'm all right. You're getting your slobber all over me," Lilia chuckled. "Come on. I want to go to Mom's appointment." He pushed back his wolf, who was going crazy over her injury, and followed Lilia and her family to another room where the doctor was already waiting. Kate asked that everyone leave the room when the appointment started. She didn't want anyone to hear some of the answers to her questions. Lilia waited anxiously outside, glaring at the light blue stars and flowers painted on the wall. She was mad at them for keeping her apart from her mother. "Stop." Johanna pulled her hand away from her face. "You're not going to have any nails soon." Lilia turned her anxious glare on her aunt and put her nails back in her mouth. She couldn't help it. Lev pulled, then licked her hand with a whine. Lilia, with a reluctant sigh, pet Lev instead. The doctor exited the room a moment later, wheeling Kate out. Her face gave nothing away, but Lilia hoped the paper she was holding would. Lilia ripped the paper from her hands and stood up. "What?" Lilia dropped to her knees and Johanna tore the paper from her hands. She fell to face Lilia and pulled her into a hug before hugging Kate and releasing an extremely loud sob. Lev walked over to the paper and just found blurry blobs of black and white in front of his head. He growled softly and pulled at the paper. Just another humiliating thing about him he couldn't read. Lev, Lilia slammed into him and cried into his shoulder. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." We get years with her. She was practically unintelligible as she wet his fur. The doctor stepped away from them to give them privacy, and Lilia stopped crying a few minutes later. She pulled away and wiped her nose on the back of her arm with a loud sniffle. Lev still pulled at the paper sitting on the floor. Lilia took a few seconds to understand and sniffled again before hugging him. 5 to 6 more years. She pointed to where she was reading. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Lev barked and panted happily, muzzling up against his mate. Her happiness was infectious. Kate, who had kept a straight face until now, was bubbling with laughter. "I told you. I knew it." Lev panted happily while watching his mate jump around her mother. He was happy that she was happy. "All right, Lilia." Kate laughed. "Calm down now. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "It's lunchtime and I'm hungry." Wait. What else did the doctor say?" Lilia pushed her hair out of her face and took a deep breath. "Take this twice a day and it'll keep my immune system up." Kate held up her bottle of medication. "And if she would be interested," the doctor interrupted, stepping back into view. "Physical therapy is an option. The medication I gave her is very, very strong and could assist in working those muscles again. Walking. You could walk again." Lilia shrieked. Lev whined and pawed at his ringing ears. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up. Look how that turned out here. Lilia interrupted her mother. There's a very high chance. The doctor murmured. We'll talk about it later. This is a lot of information in one day. Clearly exhausted. Lilia nodded and thanked Dr. Warhan profusely and motioned everyone to follow her. Beef stew was on the menu today, and Lev was drooling his way to the serving table. Lilia chuckled and forced him towards their table, coming back a few seconds later with a mixing bowl of the stew. Balanced on her other hand was a tray full of normal-sized bowls for her and her family. They talked quietly as Lev finished inhaling his food and pushed his head underneath one of her hands. Lilia ate with one hand and pet Lev with the other, feeling bad that he couldn't join the conversation. She had been so happy since her parents arrived that she hadn't even thought about how Lev must have been feeling. Was he comfortable around her family? Was he scared? She just wished they could communicate. This was not how soulmates normally worked, but Lilia was still grateful for him and grateful that he had saved her from both Alpha Howard and Ronan. Her mother and Johanna continued the conversation without her, so she turned to Lev and scratched the top of his head. We've got this. Chapter 21. All right. Lev, we're going to work on your jaw today. Do you want Lilia to do it like last time? Alpha Luke finished massaging Lev's leg and moved towards his face. Lev grunted with his eyes towards his mate, who smiled and stepped forward. Lilia, put your hands beneath his ears. Yes, like so. Move it gently this way and then back. Alpha Luke worked her through what to do, then moved to a cabinet in the corner. Does this feel okay? Lilia whispered to him. Her breath hit his face and he moved his feet in response. He's good. Lilia. Lev, I'm going to start working on your hands now. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Lev's progress was astonishing to both her and Alpha Luke. They were able to start adding weights to strengthen his legs, and because of the power of his wolf, he gained strength quickly. Alpha Luke told them Lev might walk by the end of the week. After 3 weeks of being here, Lilia could finally see her family beginning to flourish. Kate made some friends through rehab, and now that they had regular access to food, she had gained the weight her body desperately needed. Johanna went along with Kate everywhere because that's what she'd done practically her entire life. It was hard to break that routine, but Johanna made friends with Kate's friends as well. Lilia was glad they had other people than each other to rely on. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You've done great today, Lev. Do you think you're up for some talking today? Lilia removed her hands from Lev's face and watched him think of a response. Most of the time it was just long news, and but she was glad he was even getting there. She couldn't imagine how or it must feel. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. That was Lev's way of saying yes. Lilia had to fight back a chuckle because she didn't want him to feel embarrassed, but it was just so cute. As Lev and Alpha Luke worked on talking, Lilia's attention turned towards Alpha Blatt on entering the room quietly. She knew Alpha Luke and her mate had heard them, but they kept their attention focused. Instead of going towards his mate, Alpha Blatton moved to stand next to Lilia. How's he doing? Good. A little ahead of schedule. Lilia smiled. She was proud of him. Quick question, have you asked Lev how old he is? Alpha Blatton questioned. Lilia drew into herself for a moment. In theory. No, I haven't even thought about it. I think he's one of the original North American lichens. Alpha Blatton rushed. Lilia had no clue what he was talking about. The education in her pack had been way below average. Alpha Blatton tried to lead her out of the room to talk privately, but Lev's loud, gargled yell stopped him in his tracks. Lilia rushed over to show him he wasn't leaving and could see he was clearly in pain. He's overdone it, Alpha Luke said. I need to check for bleeding help sit him up. Alpha Blaton was the only one with the strength besides Alpha Luke, and even then it took both of them to lift him up. The doctor was called in to check out Lev's vocal cords. I don't even know how he's making any sound now, Dr. Wallahunt said in awe. But yes, he's overdone it. There's no bleeding, but it will probably be sore for a day or two. Lilia sighed in relief and brushed some of Lev's hair away from his face. He had a grumpy look on his face and was glaring at Lilia a little. She smiled and blushed. Lev, how old are you? Alpha Blaton asked after laying him back down. Lev glanced at Lilia, then back at Alpha Blaton. Alpha Luke smacked him, but the room fell silent, waiting for a response. Blink the number of years, Alpha Luke suggested. Lilia grabbed Lev's hand and tightened her grip as much as she could. He started blinking. The first number was 4, which had Lilia's eyebrows furrowing together in confusion. The next number was 0. 40 years old was a bit old for Lilia, but she decided she would love him no matter what. They both deserved to live of her lives happily. Lilia stood up in surprise when he kept blinking. Maybe he was trying to communicate something else to them. What could it be? 9, Alpha Blaton whispered, his voice shaky. I knew it. I knew it. Oh my God. Alpha Luke shouted, but Lilia was still confused. What was going on? How were they able to tell what he meant? I need to make some calls. Alpha Blaton rushed out of the room with a panicked look. Lilia frantically begged Alpha Luke to tell her what was going on. His Lev is over 400 years old. Lilia, 409, to be precise, he whispered. Lev suddenly shifted back and hid behind his mate, curling up nervously. He didn't understand either. I need to sit down. Alpha Luke moved towards the door. Wait. You need to explain. Lilia rushed towards him, but he was too fast out the door. Lev linked behind his mate, nervous that he had just gotten them in trouble. She rushed to her mother's room and accidentally interrupted one of Kate's friends teaching her how to knit. When she saw the state Lilia was in, she exited the room quietly. What's got you so worked up? Kate asked. Lilia walked closer and sat next to her mother on the bed. What is a North American lichen? Lilia whispered. Kate's hands froze and she slowly placed her work on her lap. When the moon goddess first created wolves, they were called lichens. They were faster, and could live longer than the normal wolf today so. The last one died about decades ago. Her pack forced her to fight in a battle and she was killed. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Melbourne, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. It took a toll on all of us. Kate had lived at the same time as a lichen. The moon goddess' original creation murdered in a pointless battle. Goodness. Kate wiped tears from her eyes. Lilia had no clue it had meant that much, but that explained the office reactions. Why did you want to know? Kate focused back on her knitting. Lilia glanced at Lev, who was still hiding behind her. Alpha Blaton is positive Lev is one of the original North American lichens. Kate froze and turned to stare at Lev. After a second he winked and crawled closer to Lilia, unable to tell if Kate was mad at him too. Lilia scratched his head to comfort him. How Kate whispered. In all the chaos I forgot to ask Lev how old he was. It turns out he's over 4 centuries old. Lilia murmured. I'm so confused. Mad and worried. I don't know what to do. I don't know what this means. Lev, come here. She held a hand out, palm facing up, and waited patiently. Lev looked at Lilia, asking if he could trust Kate not to hurt him, and Lilia seemed to understand. He softly placed his head in her outstretched hand. She curled her fingers into his fur, looked deep into his eyes, then began to sob. "Oh my, oh my," she repeated again and again. Lilia rushed to calm her mother down but knew she couldn't do it alone. "Go get Aunt Johanna," she told Lev, wrapping her arms even tighter around her mother. Lev rushed out of the room and returned with a disheveled Johanna behind him. Lilia and Johanna were able to calm her down. Once she saw Lev again, she teared up, but Johanna was quick to stop her from crying. "What has you so upset?" Johanna asked sadly. Kate turned to face Lev and opened her arms. "You didn't want to make her cry again." Lev is a lichen. Johanna," Kate whispered. Johanna's head whipped to face Lev and stared at him in shock. He finally decided to walk towards Kate as she dragged him onto her lap. He flopped down and allowed her to hug and pet him. Johanna as well. "Can someone tell me what the hell is going on?" Lilia shouted. Lev winked at his mate's angry tone and crawled off of Kate's lap. "We need to talk." Blaton burst in, completely out of breath. Now chapter 22. A lichen is unbelievably strong, and in the right hands, can protect any pack from evil. Lilia was having a hard time believing that Blaton was describing Lev. A lichen can't, and against her entire pack, fight against their largest army, and win. But, like they say, with great power comes great responsibility. A few centuries ago, Luke interjected, "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Right about the time Lev was a few years old, there was a massive uprising. The largest group of wolves the world had ever seen killed all of the lichens except one. That one lichen reproduced more and more until a century ago when they were all murdered. Once again, one was missed, and the council put the strongest security on her. Sadly, she was kidnapped, and that pack forced her to fight in a battle, to kill her own kind. She knew the moon goddess wouldn't have wanted that, so she let herself fall. With that, the original lichens, the original gift from the moon goddess, had been completely wiped out. It was like the world lost control and many different uprisings started. It seemed like the alphas were fighting to tell the story. There's so much unrest in the world right now, but we've tried to stay strong and true throughout it all. Luke reached for his mate's hand. "But, from how old you are, we think in the original massacre that there wasn't just one wolf that was left out. There were 2. Lev, I don't understand. How could we not tell he was a lichen? We need to get him talking as soon as possible." Luke stood. "Lev, I'll have Dr. Waller Hahn in early tomorrow morning to check on your vocal cords." The energy in the room was still making Lev extremely nervous. He wasn't sure if they were angry at him, if they were going to attack him. He had to be ready for all scenarios. So what does all this mean? Lilia's head was still whirling from all the information she'd received. If he is a real lichen, Blaton started, the council will need to be informed and packs all over the world will want to see him. We've got no, his name can't get out. No one can see him. What if his old pack finds out? What if my old pack finds out? She's right. Luke shook his head. Either way, the council must be informed. But Lev will hopefully be talking, and he can tell the council how to take his old pack down. What about Alpha Howard? Lilia asked. Her hands shook nervously until Lev pushed his head underneath them to relax her. We can inform the council of his attempted forced mating with you. The punishment is up to them. Now, Lev, I'm going to start working you twice a day, and if your body responds positively, which it should, then we'll move up to 3 times a day. Your Lycan wolf should be able to handle it, Luke said to them. As if their situation wasn't weird enough, now to add all of this stress onto it. Lilia let her hands catch her head as it fell towards her knees. Lev whined as her breathing quickened. Lilia. Oh, Lilia. It's all right. Alpha Luke comforted. He came around the desk in that office to rub Lilia's back. All we can do now is wait and work with Lev. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbay. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Let's just focus on that. Alpha Blaton had a point. She took a deep breath and lifted her head up. A week later, Alpha Luke moved Lev's appointments to 3 times a day. He began to spend so much time with Lilia and Lev that Alpha Blaton started to join as well. He missed his mate and usually just sat with Lilia and observed. 2 weeks after the discovery of Lev being a lichen, he was able to say the words yes and no. Time was moving by too fast, Lilia thought, and soon they would have to inform the council. Would her mate be ripped away from her? She shuddered in fear when she thought about it. She was also still getting used to the fact that Lev was over centuries old. All this was uncharted territory for her, and she was more scared than when she was in her old pack. Romance still scared her more than anything in the world. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbay, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Lev was lying in a hospital bed, hair freshly cut and hands clenching into fists, then unclenching over and over again. Lev, I'm going to start asking questions. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbay, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Just answer with yes or no. Alpha Blaton held an notepad full of questions on his lap. Lev gave him a thumbs up and took a deep breath. Lilia grabbed one of his hands and squeezed both for her and him. Do you remember anything from when you were a child, yes? Lilia was shocked every time he was able to say an actual word. He had been working so hard non-stop for weeks now, and she couldn't be prouder of him. Do you remember the massacre, yes? Lev clenched his eyes shut like he was trying not to remember what had happened. Did you run away? No. Lev opened his eyes. The dark brown orbs flashed to stare at Lilia. Did someone take you? Alpha Blaton tapped his pen against the notebook. Alpha Luke was biting his nails in anticipation. Yes, Lev whispered. Lilia gripped his hand tighter. It must have been horrific. Was it a werewolf? No. When Lev answered, both Alphas turned to each other with furrowed eyebrows. Was it lichen? Alpha Blaton sounded genuinely confused. No. Lev answered simply. Was it a human? Alpha Luke's voice was incredulous. Yes, Lev sighed. His eyes clenched shut again. Roman? Lilia whispered and stood with a gasp. Roman took you, yes. Lev started squeezing Lilia's hand to the point of discomfort. That's not possible. How did a human kidnap you 100 years ago? Lev stuttered. You don't know. Lilia finished for him. He nodded. Did Roman medicate you? To maybe weaken your lichen a bit or? No, Lev answered. His eyes were straight up towards the ceiling now, and his powerful anger rolled off of him in waves. How is your lichen still quiet? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbay, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It should have been enough time away from him for your lichen to appear. Alpha Blaton scratched his chin. We need to call in the council. Alpha Luke stood and rushed back to their office. Alpha Blaton, unlike his mate, stood slowly with a quiet grunt. You guys should probably join us for that phone call. Take your time shifting back, Lev. I know you've been working hard lately. Alpha Blaton left them alone. Lev turned his eyes to focus on his mate, who suddenly looked much older than before. He could see this entire situation resting on her shoulders and wished he could just make it all go away. No, he said quietly. Lilia looked up at him in confusion, which had gained strength in the past few weeks, lifted toward her face. His hand cupped her cheek and his fingers ghosted across her face before he threw his arm around her shoulder. He couldn't really pull her towards him, but Lilia understood and leaned forward to tuck her head into his shoulder. Lev's thick arm wrapped around her shoulder with a sigh, and Lilia smiled as she felt his body relax. "Tu agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," Lilia murmured. Lev was confused. She was the one that was stressed and she was comforting him. His selfless mate always put everyone first, and he wished to the moon goddess that he could do more. It's okay, why?" Lev repeated. Lilia pulled back in shock, a large smile on her face. He really wanted to comfort her, and the moon goddess had listened to his prayer. Lilia hugged him and laughed. Lev felt proud that he was able to raise her mood. Lilia squeezed him before standing and stepping back so he had room to shift. "Let's go, mate," Lilia said with a smile. Chapter 23. Hello, Council, Alpha Blaton said. The four of them were in some sort of conference room the Alphas commonly used for meetings. There was a large television with a camera on top of it to video call with the council. There were 5 of them, each on 5 different little screens, 3 men and 2 women. Alpha Blaton, what if the women responded, "We hear you have some interesting news for us." She tucked a strand of her grey hair behind her ear. "I do not mean to shock you, but due to some recent events we have encountered an original lichen." Surprisingly, the council did not look shocked. "We've received many reports in the last decade about these supposed lichens, Blaton. Everyone wants their ticket to fame," one of the men said. "Councilman Den Hart, I can assure you this is not a lie. Lev here is over centuries old. He was a child during the massacre and grew up under a human, so his lichen strength is little. We fear his lichen was drugged or injured permanently," said Alpha Blaton. "We will require proof." "Alpha Blaton," the original woman said. "We will not visit until that proof is secured. We will send a messenger to personally secure a sample. It will be tested at our facility and we will contact you with the results." "Good day," Councilman Den Hart said. With a click, all of their faces disappear. Alpha Blaton blew out a big breath and his chair. It seemed the council wasn't only intimidating to Lilia. "What do we do now?" Lilia cleared her throat to settle herself. "Well, the messenger should show up tomorrow and collect the sample. What will that consist of?" "The messenger will watch Dr. Alejandro Edgewater to make sure the sample is not tampered with. Then they will transport it back to the council for the test," Alpha Lucant said. "Where are they located?" Lilia wondered aloud. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," Blaton answered, smiling at Alpha Luke, who had started running his fingers through his mate's hair. "United Kingdom. That's far. How will he get here that fast?" "Their messenger will probably be getting on a plane right now." Alpha Luke checked his watch. "All we can do right now is relax. Go eat with your family and we'll do the red water test tomorrow morning when Lev comes for his rehab," Alpha Blaton encouraged gently. "Yes, Alpha. Once again. I cannot thank you enough," Lilia said. They both smiled and nodded at her and leave the room quietly. Lydia's legs wobbled and Lev was there to catch her. She managed to make it to their room before she laid on the bed and took a deep breath. "So much is happening," she whispered. Lev curled his large wolf body around her head to keep her warm. She must have been so exhausted. Without a noise, Lev jumped off the bed and opened the door with his mouth. Lilia looked up to see him dash out the door and got comfortable underneath the covers rather than following him. She felt bad that he'd always had to be near her. Maybe he wanted to get to know some people or do something on his own. She wouldn't stop him. He really deserved it. A few minutes later, Lev trotted back in with a big, toothy grin. He held a plastic bag in between his teeth and brought it straight to Lilia. She sat up in bed and took it from him, giving him a confused look. She opened the plastic container inside to reveal the lasagna that was being cooked downstairs. Lilia practically shrieked with delight and hugged Lev really tight. "Thank you, and I'm sorry you keep having to do things for me," she apologized sheepishly. Lev nuzzled into her side so hard he almost knocked her over. She giggled when he started licking her face and pushed him away when she'd had enough. "Thank you," she said again. He nuzzled into her side and watched her eat. When she finished her meal, she curled into him, turned on the TV, and fell asleep quickly. The next morning they woke up early and rushed to Lev's rehab room. Dr. Wallahan, Alpha Luke, and a stranger were waiting. "Hi, I'm Leah." She held out her hand. "I'm just here to get the sample," the messenger said, ignoring the hand. "Let's get this finished so I can arrive by dinner time." Lydia put her hand back at her side and Lev growled lowly at the stranger for the disrespect. "It's all right, Lev. Let's get this over with," Alpha Luke muttered. Drawing his red water didn't take long and the young messenger was out of their hair in no time. Alpha Luke and Lydia proceeded with Lev's rehab and Alpha Luke told Lydia some of the best news she's ever heard. "We've done so much work with the weights that I think we'll be able to start walking next week. How does that sound?" Lev made a noise of delight and Lydia couldn't help but giggle at the thought of him walking. It would make him a lot more independent. She was sure he would love that. "Are you serious?" "I wouldn't joke about his progress. You're doing great, Lev," Alpha Luke assured. They had another training session after lunch and after dinner as well. Alpha Blaton burst into the third session with the phone in his hand. "It's the council," he rushed, the phone ringing in his hand. "I thought we should all be here to answer it." "Yes, council," Alpha Luke answered next to Alpha Blaton. I don't know how it's possible." It was the first councilwoman that had spoken the previous day. There was loud chatter in the background. "I didn't either, councilwoman, but research needs to be done on the state of his lichen and we need to personally meet with the entire council before anyone speaks of this. It could put his life in danger," Alpha Blaton said. That was the most strict he'd ever sounded around Lilia. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Alpha Blaton. "I trust you will protect him with your strongest warriors," she said strongly. "I will protect him with my life. The council will need to keep their trip quiet. If anyone were to hear the council was here." "We'll keep it quiet, Alpha Blaton. You needn't worry," she assured. Seconds later, she said her final greetings and hung up. This was such a big deal that the entire council would be there the next day. Lilia grew worried for her mate. He was about to be poked and prodded by a bunch of strangers, and if it would accidentally spread, both their lives would be in danger. She hadn't seen her mother and aunt in at least 20, for hours, which was the longest she'd gone without seeing them since they arrived. It had her nerves on edge. "Let's all get some rest. It seemed like today was going to go exactly like the day before, and we'll meet with the council midday tomorrow." Alpha Blaton rubbed his mate's back in comfort. At least Leah wasn't the only one that was stressed. Chapter 24. Can we sleep in my mother's room tonight? Both Alphys had left the room and Lev was still in his human form. He thought about it for a second. "Yes," was his simple response. She smiled gratefully and put a hand on his cheek. She shrieked, then giggled in surprise when Lev shifted under her fingers. She relaxed and brushed through his fur with her fingers. "Let's go tell her the news," Leah whispered. Lev followed closely behind her until they made it to Kate's room. As soon as they walked into the room, Kate dropped what she was doing and opened her arms for Lev. She had been plenty welcoming before they found out about Lev, but this was on a completely different level. Lev passed Leah and jumped up on the bed. He crawled into her lap and Lilia giggled when Kate's arms wrapped around him. Lev practically melted on her lap and Lilia was surprised he wasn't purring. "The council is coming tomorrow," Lilia said gently. Johanna, who had been running her fingers through Lilia's hair, froze in her spot. "I've never met the council," Kate gasped excitedly. Johanna smiled at Kate's contagious happiness. "They have proven that Lev is a lycan, so they want to meet with us before anyone gets word of it." "I'm worried, Aunt Johanna. What if it's Preds and Alpha Howie finds out? What if Lev's old leader finds out?" Lilia asked worriedly. "It'll all be figured out with time," Johanna soothed. "I can't believe the council is coming." "I hope they're keeping their travels quiet," Kate murmured. She started scratching underneath Lev's chin and his tail started thumping against the bed. Kate laughed at him. Lilia was extremely glad Lev and her family got along so well. She was so frightened when she left Alpha Howard's pack, but she couldn't imagine how scared her family was, letting her go with some unknown wolf. "They said they are. I think they understand how important it is to keep his identity private," Lilia murmured. Johanna made a noise of understand and continued brushing her fingers through Lilia's hair. "Can we sleep here tonight? I have a feeling the next few weeks, maybe months, are going to get busy." Lilia asked her mom. "To my agent extraordinaire, Mylen Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "I would love to have you here," Kate smiled. Her hands started scratching Lev's stomach and Levstag started trying to scratch it too. "You're not enjoying that at all. How, Lev?" Lilia's voice seemed to snap Lev out of his happiness. He sat up and scooted away from Kate with a huff. "No, Kate wind. Come back. I was just joking. Lev, if you enjoy it, you don't have to stop." Lilia chuckled. Lev contemplated that for a few moments, then crawled back into Kate's laugh. That night went by fast. Time always went by fast when Lilia was with her family. That family included Lev now, too, and she couldn't be happier. In the morning, Johanna rushed Lilia around to get ready. She put her in the nicest dress ball, which turned out to be a thin, dark green, knee-length dress that was donated to her through the hand-me-down program in the pack. Johanna helped Kate dress in one of her older, nicer dresses before they made their way to the same conference room Lilia had been in not too long ago. The council was there waiting for them along with both of the alphas. The council all stood silently when Lilia and Lev entered the room. Kate and Johanna followed shortly. "I was under the impression that no one else would know about this," Alpha Blatorn, one of the council men, said. Johanna stopped wheeling Kate into the room and looked at Lilia hesitantly. Lev took a step backwards, towards Lilia and her family, and growled as loud as he could. The council and both alphas took a step back. They're his mate's family, councilmen, which means they are his family too. They go wherever he goes, Alpha Blaton answered. "Stand down. Lev, everything is all right." Lev slowly stopped growling but kept his protective stance. One of the council women waved Kate and Johanna inside, and Lev followed them until they were both seated. "We've brought our best researcher with us," one of the council men said, motioning behind them. "This is Dr. Richard N. Wylan. My name is Lilia," Lilia introduced after a not so subtle glance from Alpha Blaton. "I am Lev's mate. My family is next to me, my mother Kate and Aunt Johanna." "It is nice to meet you all," one of the council men said, shooting a nervous glance at Lev. "My name is Councilwoman Longworth," one of the women said, "and with us is Councilman Anne Hart, Councilman Locan, Councilwoman Frida L., and Councilman Jar Old." "It is nice to meet you, Council," Lilia spoke quietly. Her and her family bowed their heads slightly. "Let's talk about privacy for a moment before we move into the research portion of our visit," Councilman Loken said. The tall, grey-haired man stood followed by the other council members and moved towards Lev. Lev didn't believe they were three but didn't like the fact that they were all coming towards him at once. He waited quietly and was about to take a protective stance when the 5 council members knelt in front of him. Lycan, Councilman Loken murmured, we are grateful for your gift from the moon goddess. If you need anything, please let us know. He does not know of formalities, council, but I am sure he appreciates the gesture. Alpha Luke spoke for Lev. The wolves simply nodded it in agreement and the council moved back their seats. Our reason of privacy has 2 parts, one being the pack Lev came from, and the other would be the June pack. Alpha Blatt explained. Lilia will tell you more. The June pack went to battle with the rogue pack that's been attacking packs and somehow captured their strongest warrior. Lilia motioned to Lev. The Alpha tried to force his mating upon me, and the day before he was forcing me to move in with him, he tried to auction Lev off to the highest bidder. The council kept their guarded expressions and didn't give anything away. I realized Lev was my mate and rushed to stop my Alpha, but it only increased his excitement for the auction. Lev was able to escape, grab me, and leave pack lands. We haven't returned. Lilia finished. Do you have evidence of the forced mating? Councilman Old asked. Ask anyone in the pack. Lilia murmured, but I fear if Alpha Howie finds out about any of this, that he will come for me. Understood. We will send someone to investigate with the utmost secrecy, Councilwoman Frida L. said softly, nodding in understanding. About Lev's pack, it's the rogue pack that's been attacking packs around the country, and the leader, Roman, is a human, and he's forming this huge army. He was the one who kidnapped Lev 4 centuries ago. Lilia explained. That's impossible. One of the council men chuckled. Are you sure he's human? I'm positive. I don't know how he's done it, but that man is frightening. He's psychotic. Lilia shuddered. Lev winked and licked her hands to bring her out of the memory. He didn't think he would ever not feel guilty about bringing her there. When I got there, Lev was completely brainwashed. He didn't understand anything, including me. He didn't understand why he had the mate connection with me, because he didn't know what mates were. Lilia's shaky voice was a clear indication that she was getting sucked back into the memory. Johanna rubbed her back and Lev practically tried to climb on her lap to bring her back. Lilia worked with Lev to help him understand what was going on, and eventually they escaped, but not without a threat that Roman would return and punish them one day. Alpha Blaton said clearly. Lilia began to weep quietly. It was the most frightening experience of her life, and she was terrified that either Alpha Howie or Roman would make her go back. We will figure everything out, Councilwoman Longworth assured Lilia. You will both be protected. Now let's talk about the research. Chapter 25. Lilia sniffled and wiped her eyes several times while following Alpha Blatt onto a medical room drive.
And Wylan had thought a few ideas to check on Lev's psychic on the flight over here,
they'd said. She heard the robes of the council swishing behind her and tried not to tremble in trepidation. Lev purposefully brushed his back under her hands and sighed in relief when she clenched his fur. He had also never heard of this council before, but he wasn't as intimidated as Lilia. He knew he was stronger than all of them combined. Lev would protect her and himself if things went awry. Into this room right here, Council, Dr. Wallahan motioned. It was similar to the room Lilia and Lev spent most of their time in, only larger. They didn't know this existed. Lilia walked quickly to the far corner of the room near the examination bed. Lev followed and stared at the council as they entered and stood against one-wall drive. And Wylan and drive. Wallahan spoke quietly outside of the room before entering and shutting the door. Alpha Blaton stood in front of it so no one could come in from the outside. From what I have heard, drive. Anne pulled on some gloves. It seems to me your Lycan is stuck behind something. We just have to figure out what. Shift, please. Dr. Wallahan spoke quietly to Lev. Lilia respectfully turned her glance towards the other side of the room. Lev noticed the council was not going to look away and growled under his breath when he shifted. Both doctors were quick to cover him up, and Lilia soon turned around to reach for Lev's hand as she always did when he shifted. Please. No contact with him at the moment. Drive Wallen reached for Lilia's hand. She didn't want the physical contact with the stranger and was also disappointed and confused about why she was unable to touch her mate. She lost her view of Lev and was forced to stare at the white coats both doctors were wearing as they leaned over her mate. Lev's growl vibrated through Lilia's chest and she thought she could feel her ribs rattling inside her body. She stepped up to touch him before remembering that she couldn't. Ill came from in front of the doctors. This time, Lilia ignored the doctor's words and grabbed his hand again.
Can you walk us through what you're going to do?
Dive in, Wylan? Lilia asked, a little aggravated that they hadn't asked for any sort of permission. I don't. If he's such a sacred lichen, then why are you not asking him for consent to touch him? Lilia clearly expressed her frustration. Alpha Luke stepped forward and gripped Lilia's shoulder to pull her away from the conversation, but she shook him off. Such disrespect, Councilman Jarl admonished with a sneer. Lev fought to sit up with a snarl even louder than before. I do not mean to be rude, Council, but I think you've forgotten that Lev is above you. Don't disrespect him, and we won't have a problem. Alpha Blaton spoke loudly. Lev stopped growling. Councilman Jarl clenched his jaw and Councilwoman Longworth pulled the council together to speak. Lilia stepped closer to Lev and clenched his hand tighter while he tried not to shift to defend her. Alpha Blaton, Lilia, Councilwoman Longworth spoke after a few seconds of silence. There will be no more problems. Drive Wylan. Respect the lichen and his mate. He's the last of the lichens. We are blessed to have him. Yes, Councilwoman, the doctor said, slightly bowing to her. He turned back to Lev with a short glance at Lilia and showed him his empty palms. May I? He asked softly. Lev clenched his jaw, glanced at Lilia as well, then turned back to the doctor. His anger was prominent. Yes, he was still clearly upset, so Lilia clenched his hand tighter. Any tighter than this, her hand might break. His hands pressed carefully onto Lev's abdomen several times, then to his face, and then announced to the room that he was going to take another sample of electrolyte water. Lev, the mighty lichen, grunted softly when the needle entered his skin. Lilia just smirked and held his hand tight. They were freed to eat lunch while drive. Learn and drive. Wallahan continued with several tests with lead water. Lilia abstinently chewed a single bite of her food far longer than she needed. Her eyes were glazed over, clearly worried or stressed. Lev finished his food and looked to see that she hadn't eaten any more of her food. Goddess, how he wished he could help her. Johanna noticed his worried glance from the other side of Lilia and picked up her fork. After putting a little bit of food onto it, she lifted it up to Lilia's mouth and watched as she took a soft, robotic bite. After finishing their food, including Lilia, who looked a little perkier, they made their way back to the room where both doctors were chatting up a storm. The council was also already there waiting for them, making Lilia blush in embarrassment. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilgan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Drive Wylan. Now that everyone is here, what kind of news do you have for us? Councilwoman Longworth asked. The doctor stood to face her. There's a strange mass on his left side. The doctor cleared his throat. I tested his red water to find out what it was, but it's not in his red water stream. Which is impossible. How can you tell that the mass is what is affecting the lichen part of him? Councilman Enhart asked. his thick eyebrows furrowed in the middle of his head. I can't but would like to perform surgery to examine the mass myself. It shouldn't take more than 2 hours. Let's do that today, Councilman Jarl muttered. As long as it's okay with a lichen. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Is that all right with you, Lev? Lilia asked, ignoring the Jack's question. She was already sick of the council watching their every move and being snarky with them. Sure, Lev showed off his talking skills. The sound had been really hard for him to get and he was clearly proud of what he'd learned. Alpha Luke chuckled behind them but quieted when the council stared at him. I'll get that set up. Dr. Wallahan exited the room. Do you have an operating room with privacy glass? Yes, right this way. Alpha Blaton extended his hand towards the door. Lilia didn't move. She would join them when it was actually time. Surprisingly, Lev looked really nervous. He had let his tough FA fall when everyone else, especially the council, and now appeared absolutely terrified. It's all right. It's a common sort of surgery. Everything will be okay. Lilia assured. I won't let anything happen to you. Lev's abhorrent look was replaced with a smug smirk. Lilia began to glare at him. What? Why you? He wheezed and made a gesture of someone fighting. Me. Protect you. Of course I will. Lilia's voice raised slightly in aggravation. Sure. A rough chuckle that sounded more like a cough echoed from Lev's chest. We're not sure the anesthesia will work on Lev. Though his lichen won't show himself, I think it will wear off much too soon. I think we have a better chance if we just numb the area, but keep him unconscious. Lilia sighed when Drive, Weiler interrupted them. Everyone in Alpha Blaton's pack had the courtesy of knocking. She assumed the council was used to doing whatever they wanted. Drive. Wallahan followed behind him and listened to what he was saying intently. All right, Lev. You are going to be conscious during the surgery, but we have a curtain blocking you from seeing anything. Lilia could see the panic rising back in Lev's eyes. I'm allowed to sit with you. And, doctor? Lilia asked. She'd heard of surgeries like this before and really hoped what she'd heard was correct. Yes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Dr. Wallahan assured. Lev's heartbeat slowed until it was back to normal. They wheeled his bed into the surgery room and Lilia really tried her best to ignore the council's eyes, staring at her through a window off to the side. His heart monitor started up, the slow beeps bringing Lilia comfort. She held his hand tight and helped with the oxygen mask over his nose and mouth. He didn't look as nervous, now relaxed when she clenched his hand as tight as she could. We will begin now. Drive Wallahan spoke loudly. They were both dressed in light blue scrubs with bright white face masks and a plastic shield over their eyes. Lev, can you feel this? Lilia looked over the curtain to see Drive. While Anne applied pressure to Lev's stomach with his hand. Lev shook his head, afraid that if he opened his mouth a sob would come out. He wasn't in pain, and he couldn't feel the man's hand, but he was scared. Goddess, was he afraid? After a few minutes of silence except for the slow, relaxed beeping of the heart monitor Drive, Lan made an announcement. Oh my dear. Anne took a step back. Lilia, do you have a camera with you? What? I need a camera, and now Drive. Lan raised his voice. What's going on in there? Alpha Blaton's voice came through a small speaker to their right. Lev's panicked eyes met Lilia's. Alpha Blaton, yelled Drive. Wallahan, stick your hand out the door and give Lilia a phone. What? Alpha Blaton knocked over the microphone. Lilia didn't want to leave Lev alone, but the urgency in the doctor's voice was making her anxious as well. As she stepped away, Lev's heart monitor skyrocketed as she tried her best not to turn around. She grabbed her Alpha's phone and raced back towards Lev's head. His eyes were wide and his breathing irregular, and Dr. Wallahan was trying to calm him down. What do I do? Looking at the dark phone in confusion. Top right is the power button. Turn it on, then swipe your finger across the screen, Alpha Wallahan explained. She did as she was told and a large number of squares appeared on the screen. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Dr. N. Wyatt scoffed. Stupid Alpha wouldn't have a passcode. I'm right here, Doctor. Get to the point. Alpha Blaton snarled into the microphone. Should we come in there? A councilman shouted from behind the glass. Drive N while Anne just shook his head in response. Open that app, yes. The grey one now, press and hold the button on the bottom. Hold it over his torso. Sorry if you're squeamish. Drive Wallahan apologized. Lilia was squeamish. She used her other hand to cover her mouth and tried her best to stop herself from puking. Seeing one's mate's insides was not something anyone ever planned to see. She closed her eyes and somehow held her hand still while she held the photograph button on Alpha Blaton's phone. A few moments later, she heard a loud splat and even louder gasps from the onlookers behind the glass. Lilia tentatively opened her eyes and dropped the phone on the ground when she took it in drive. N.Y.Lan had removed a large, moving pile of goop from her mate. She staggered backwards, Lev's heart monitor still going insane, and fell to the floor. Lev roared when her eyes rolled to the back of her head. The doctors stepped back with a gasp. Lycan. Chapter 26. Despite his ripped, open abdomen, Lev's Lycan appeared stronger than ever before. He easily towered to the ceilings and continued to grow. Lev's back pushed into the ceiling as he glared at the doctors and snarled, his spit and slobber dripping onto their heads. No one leaves the room, Councilwoman Longworth shouted. Even the council backed up and cowered in fear. Not until we figure out what that is. Lev walked loudly, more like stomping, over to Leah. In her unconsciousness, she was oblivious as to what was happening to the rest of the room. He turned and gave the doctors another loud, warning snarl before dropping his body around Lilia. Alpha Blaton grabbed his mate's hand and moved towards the glass divider now that Lev seemed to have calmed down. He had already been larger than both Alphas when he arrived at the pack, but now he wouldn't be able to shift inside the house. It would be a lot harder to keep him a secret. The doctors turned their attention to the black mass on the table drive. Wallahan raced around the room to look for a container to put it in. The first thing he found was a plastic Tupperware container. Within a few seconds the plastic melted away and the substance tried to move off the table. It's got something to do with magic. Drive N.Y.Lant spoke on the phone to everyone behind the mirror. Alpha Luke's phone was on speaker in the other room. That's impossible, spoke one of the councilmen. I think we need to consider anything possible. Councilman, Alpha Blaton said. He wiped his forearm over his forehead, his face clearly showing his stress. This man, Roman, he's human, yet he has lived over for centuries. How? Magic, Councilman Old whispered. The magicians were killed long before the Lycans. Alpha Luke muttered. He must have escaped, just as Lev was the only one left. The room fell into silence. I don't know what to do about this thing, Drive N.Y.Lan shouted. It may attack one of us, so we need to come up with a solution now. We need to find a way to contain it, Councilwoman Longworth thought aloud. Perhaps. It seemed as though Alpha Blaton was searching for words to use. It is no werewolf, but perhaps because it's lived inside of one silver will be rather poisonous to it. It's worth a try. I will run and speak with the blacksmith. He can tell us how long it will be. Alpha Luke scurried out of the room. We will have to monitor this thing constantly. Drive Wallahan and I will take turns watching and maintaining it, Drive Wylan said. Is there anything you all will need? Anything at all? Councilman Enhart asked through the phone. Toiletries. Alpha Blaton. Is your pack able to sustain Lev's stomach? Drive Wallahan muttered. We should be able to, but I'll talk to the head chef about it. We still need to keep this as much of a secret as we can. The council said a few parting words and started to leave the room. Books, Alpha Blaton heard in his head. He tripped while distracted and fell forward, his hands coming out to catch him. What the hell? Qui my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Rubbing his head, blankets too. Alpha Blaton shouted and smacked the side of his head as if trying to get rid of the voice that way. What's wrong? Blaton, one of the council members asked. It's talking to me. He clenched his eyes shut. The thing is talking to me. Imbecile. The voice spoke again. Alpha Blaton exclaimed loudly and clenched his hair. Lev, is that you or should we be worried? Drive Wylan spoke calmly with a smirk. The voice said in Drive. Wylan's head. He nodded to Alpha Blaton. Prove it. Your mate accidentally touched my scrotum during rehabilitation a few days ago. He ran to you crying. The voice laughed. A blush rose on Alpha Blaton's cheeks and he stood with an embarrassed chuckle. It's Lev, he admitted sheepishly. It doesn't surprise me that the lichen is able to do that. Councilwoman Longworth laughed. Alpha Blaton glared at Lev as they all left to get supplies. Lev made a low rumbling to show how pleased he was and used his nose to nudge Lilia into a comfortable position. Once her head rested on one of his paws, he sniffed the rest of her body to check her for injuries. He was grateful Kate and Johanna weren't here to witness what had just happened. It would have only made them more upset. Alpha Blaton and several pack members dropped off plastic tubs right inside the door drive. Wallahan waited until the door was closed before walking over and examining its contents. He set a few things aside before gathering a bunch of items in his arms. I'm just going to set this near you so you can reach it, the doctor said carefully. Lilia woke up as the items were being set on the ground. She sat up too quickly and shrieked when she saw what was in front of her. The largest wolf she had ever seen, hell, the world had ever seen, had her cornered in the corner of the operating. One glance at the operating table had her eyes widening even more than they already were. Where was he? There was also the moving black thing that both doctors were trying to contain. Lilia took a deep breath in but couldn't find a way to push it out. Movement caught her eye to her right in the large breath she had, but it was in a piercing, loud shriek. The largest wolf she'd ever seen was laying in front of her. Lilia, it's all right, drive. Wallahan held his hands out in front of him. That's Lev in front of you. At a closer glance you realized the doctor was right, but still didn't trust the size of the wolf. All Lev wanted to do was speak to her to comfort her, but was afraid it would only frighten her more. He just crawled towards her a little bit and whined to show he was sorry. He didn't mean for this to happen. Lilia didn't touch him until he had slowly placed his head underneath her hand like he had done so many times before. After a minute she started to scratch his fur and then he placed his entire large head in her lap. It was the size of a large dog itself and she used both hands. A little while later, she clearly felt better. What happened? Lilia asked the doctors. He saw you fall, shifted with his chest wide open. Councilwoman Longworth demanded we quarantine in this room until we can contain this mass. Wylan explained. So this is his lichen form. That's correct. Now we just need to stay here until the council figures out what to do. Does my family know? Lilia's eyes widened. I don't know, Lilia. I can assure you that everything will be all right. Drive Wallahan assured. Just then, the phone rang from across the room drive. Wylan reached for it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And put it on speaker. How is everything going, guys? Alpha Luke's sympathetic voice echoed against all the metal in the room. Lilia is awake now. Hello, Alpha Luke, she greeted. It's nice to hear your voice. Lilia, I have an update from the blacksmith. It's going to be at least 20 for 248 hours. Dive Walhan murmured. I'm so sorry about this, guys. Anything you need, please let me know. Thanks. Alpha, drive. Wylan said and hung up. Don't freak out. Lev whispered in Lee's head. Her eyes widened, and he could already see her freaking out. It's me, Lev. She blinked and glanced at him. What did you just say? He murmured again. No, she insisted. Prove it. When we left your pack, you hid in a bush and sneezed when a bunch of rogues were looking for you. He murmured. How is this possible? She whispered in astonishment. I think it's a power. Drive in, Wylan said. He left drive. Wallahan to watch the black mass move around on the table and on a chair near the door. I think it's a side effect of the magic blob that was inside of him. Surprised Lev gave her a big, wolfy grin. So what do we do now? We wait, and wait, and wait. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.